Hey gang, welcome back again to Ken Tamplin Vocal Academy, where the proof is in the singing. I'm doing this really fun series and it's taking isolated vocal stems. I'm doing an analysis and a vocal tutorial, and I'm also talking about some of the production things that go on and the lyrics and so forth and overall artistry. And in this case, I'm gonna do Amy Lee from Evanescence. The song is called Bring Me to Life. Now I did a version of this with my student Sarah Loera. You guys can find that in the description, see how we did. Pretty hard to beat Amy though, she's so unique. Not just a character voice unique, but unique in every way. She was such a pioneer in her sound and in kind of bringing in rap and rock and all that together way early on, and just an all-around great musician. She's just very melodic and very musical. So I just want to dive right in and we'll just make some comments along the way. So let's rock.
How can you see into my eyes like open doors?
Okay, right there. Now, very melodramatic, very theatrical, somewhat goth sounding, right? And I'm not saying they started goth. There was other bands that was doing it a long time. I mean, for crying out loud, Black Sabbath was technically goth, back in the early 70s. So, but as far as kind of a nouveau goth, like newer goth, combining rap and goth and some other things together, she really pioneered a sound. Now, when I say she's musical, I really mean that. She's a good piano player, a great songwriter, great lyricist. And this song is really interesting too, because, at this time, coming off of a lot of, post-grunge and a lot of things that were going on early 90s and so forth, or early mid 90s, I meant to say, you have this girl coming in out of nowhere, and there weren't a lot of chicks rocking at that time. I mean, there were a few, and of course there were still the holdovers, which were Ann Wilson from Heart and Pat Benatar and, various people like that. But for the most part, Lizzie Hale hadn't quite happened yet. And she was, coming on the scene later. But there weren't a lot of girl singers. Now, there were some. I'm not saying that. I don't want to list them all right now because you know who they are, especially in the goth, movement in that time frame. But so the lyrics in this are really cool. How can you see into my eyes like open doors, leading you down into my core where I become so numb? Well, it's interesting that I just came off of doing Chester Bennington, Linkin Park, and the song Numb, and I never thought about kind of putting those lyrics together, now what she's talking about. Now, his was about, parental smothering, so to speak, and what they expect of kids and whatnot, and hers is different. Hers is more a spiritual thing, I think. But anyway, without a soul, my spirit's sleeping, sometimes cold, until you find it, then it leads me back home. So it's a very mysterious, kind of dark, creepy kind of sound, but she's very melodramatic. So she takes this great big breath. Check it out. Listen.
How can you see into my eyes like open doors?
Now, and she has a very almost operatic approach. So she goes, how can you see into my eyes like open doors? So she's not, how can you see? She's, right? So it kind of reminds me of like a little bit of Ghost love song, sort of that era, that kind of time, or that sound a little bit. And that's cool because I love that song too. And I love that band, actually, killer band. But so I wanted to, when I was mentioning great female vocalists, I should have talked about Tarja and some others, but I want to stay focused on her because there's a lot to cover. It's a long song. So anyway, so you've got this very operatic, very theatrical, very dramatic kind of sound. Let's move on.
Leading you down into my core where I become so numb.
Now, her note choice is leading you down into my core where I become so numb, right? So she does like, some minor 7, some flat 5 stuff. She does, a lot of minor 9 stuff. Her note choices are really interesting. Believe it or not, sometimes, and this is going to be a really oddball kind of statement, but it kind of reminds me when she comes and trails off to the end of some note choices, like Sade. Right? She's like, oh, smooth operator, right? She's minor 9 stuff. She's picking like a lot of really interesting note choices, which are very untypical, and it's very untypical for that time. And no one was really doing that except her, really. Like I said, there were some goth bands and whatnot, so I don't want to diminish, the awesomeness of some other bands, but she was definitely one of the few doing it. I can at least say that, okay? Very operatic approach, and even though she has vibrato, she's choosing not to use it to also have more of a dramatic effect instead of going, leading you down into my core where I become so numb. She doesn't do that. Come so numb. She wants that feeling of numb. So she's really pushing the lyric also too on this. Also notice she doesn't use any auto, tune. She's not using auto tune, folks. She's a real musician. She wants it known. She doesn't need it. She doesn't want it. She wants the intimacy of her vocals to be heard rather than sounding robotic. And by the way, there is some robotic stuff when you get to the chorus. We'll get to that in a minute. But she's choosing to go more the organic route. Here we go.
Without a soul, my spirit's sleeping somewhere cold.
See, sleeping somewhere. Remember those note choices, right? Pretty interesting, pretty cool. Very, very musical.
Without a soul, my spirit's sleeping somewhere cold until you find it there and lead it back home.
Cool. And you notice the dynamic range, right? She's using a lot of dynamic range, volume, and a lot of intensity changes in her singing to really drive home just this spiritually engaging kind of vocal. So pretty cool, pretty interesting,
Wake me up inside, wake me up inside.
Now, listen to those harmonies. Wake me up inside, wake me up inside, wake me up inside. Right? It's very, very unique harmonies. Now, we talked about Linkin Park in the choruses, how those choruses had really unique harmonies, and there's a lot of bands that did it. In this time frame, around the early 90s, and it kind of started with the grunge era and then spawned off from that, the goal was to not sound too commercial. And the goal was to not sound too predictable. And so a lot of the bands, a lot of the grunge bands chose the garage band route and did a lot of the 60s progressions. And you can really hear a lot of that, which was interesting, which was not typical of the 80s metal bands that the whole era had just left. And in this case, it's kind of taking it up a notch. It's combining, all of these interesting orchestral, classical sounding changes with some very unusual harmonies in the process. Listen closely, pretty interesting.
Wake me up inside, wake me up inside.
Wake me up
Call
inside.
my name and save me from the dark. Bid my blood to run before I come undone. Save me from the nothing I've become.
Now, it's a pretty big tip-off, too, from maybe a Celtic or maybe, an early Druid sort of almost British, Scottish kind of bid my blood to run. You could tell that the poetry of this comes from some, 16th, 17th century-ish kinds of things. So again, drawing more back from, this early, very Gothic kind of thing. You wouldn't use a line like bid my blood to run unless you're trying to invoke that kind of vibe, okay? So, I thought that was interesting.
Now that I know what I'm without, you can just leave me. Breathe into me and make me breathe.
Now, she also does some things that are a little dangerous to do as a singer operatically. Breathe into her. She raises her larynx at some points, and not all the time, but she does that for effect too. So it gives kind of right? And the problem with that is once you get the larynx locked in a raised position like that, it's hard to relax and neutralize or even lower them in an operatic sound. A way to do it is is to go back to the ah vowel so you can drop the larynx into a neutral or lower position, which she winds up doing in a minute. But it's interesting that she's not only using an operatic approach, a Gothic approach to the sound, she's also kind of playing a little bit with the larynx to give, to invoke a different emotion in the throat as she's going along. Listen closely, it's pretty interesting.
Breathe into me, make me real, bring me to life.
She said, bring me to life. The minute she does that, she drops the larynx and then neutralizes it, and it's a different sound altogether. Pretty cool, man. All right.
Wake me up inside, wake me up inside, call my name and save me from the dark, bid my blood to run.
Now, of course, she double-tracked the vocals all around so that the chorus would be taken up a notch for energy and power and bigness, okay? So, and a lot of people do that. I do that too. You know, you want the chorus to be big and make a bolder statement. So then when it repeats itself, it's pretty obvious that's the chorus.
Before I come undone, save me from the nothing I've become. Bring me to life.
I've been living a lie. There's nothing inside.
Bring me to life.
Can you kind of hear the Celtic kind of vibe going on? Like I'm not saying it's exactly that, but it's goth meets you know, kind of Irish folk music or Celtic music. I can really hear like I haven't listened to it, seen if she's written anything Celtic, but I could certainly hear kind of Irish folk or Celtic music, you know, Mayor Brennan, Clannad, like that whole thing. And there's definitely a lot of influence, or at least seemingly some of that influence, not just in the lyric, but also in some of these lines and the way the harmonies themselves are arranged. So I thought that was interesting.
Frozen inside without your touch, without your love, darling. Oh.
Now, this part, which is kind of interesting, is kind of commercial. Like the whole song's not commercial at all. And then this kind of melodic line, check it out. Frozen. Let's do it again. I'll play it and then I'll sing it. Here we go.
Frozen inside without your touch.
Say, frozen inside without your touch. Without your love, darling. It's pretty poppy, right? So a reason for doing this is when you have something dark, and you'll see this a lot in orchestral stuff. I mean, you'll in fact, I challenge you, dig up some really cool kind of mystical orchestral pieces that you like, movie soundtrack stuff, and you're going to hear that they take the theme of the movie and they morph it in all kinds of different ways through the movie so that it pounds and embeds in your head the theme of the movie. But what they do, Hans Zimmer's really great at this. I mean, you know, there's so many great guys, Danny Elfman, there's so many great guys that take this theme, and John Williams, and they'll literally minor key, major key, minor and major key, kind of, you know, a very droning key that's almost no key at all. You know, it's almost diatonic with no actual, you know, real pitch. It could be chromatic and kind of be done in any environment. And so you'll see all this stuff, you hear all this stuff. And so a trick to good songwriting is to take a minor key thing, like she's doing like a movie soundtrack, driving the point home, but you become so bound up in the darkness of it, or in the body, the spirit kind of wants some kind of release. I know I might sound like I'm reading more into this than is really there, but no, this really exists within. I've done a lot of orchestral music, so if you go to imdb.com, you can see all of my credits for all the film and TV stuff, or not all, but a lot of the film and TV stuff that I've done. So I know a lot about orchestration. But anyway, so you'll take this orchestration, and the spirit is like, it's so dark. I'm so bound up into this that when you go into a major key, it goes, and it kind of releases the spirit of the tension you've been feeling all this time, so that when you come back again for the chorus that's in a minor key, it drives it home even harder, and you have all this emotional roller coaster of minor to major and minor to major, then finally this big minor key payoff, or if it's a happy scene, a major key payoff, or something that's kind of mysterious, minor and major happens a lot too. But you'll really notice this in orchestral soundtrack music, happens all the time, and she's doing that here. That's why I say she's so musical, as she's pulling out all the stops in all these cool ways, and whether she deliberately is doing it or it's just by osmosis from hearing a lot of great composers or whatever, she's actually doing a great job, man.
Frozen inside without your touch, without your love, darling.
All major, little minor there, to major.
All this time, I can't believe I couldn't see. Kept in the dark, but you were there in front of me.
I've been sleeping 1,000 years, it seems. Got to open my eyes to everything. Don't let me die here.
See how dramatic it
Bring
is?
me.
Now, this probably would have really been a really good vampire music song. Maybe it did, and I didn't know it. Sorry, guys. If this has appeared in a vampire movie, I didn't know it. But, you know, of course, we know the video. That's where I remember mostly for the video following out the window and, you know, all that stuff, and the skyscraper. But it would have been a great, like, you know, bring back death to life kind of song, right? So.
Wake me up inside. Wake me up inside. Call my name and save me from the dark. Bid my blood to run.
Now, I've done this song with one of my students. In fact, I've done a couple Evanescence tunes. I've done a lot of Amy's stuff, so I'll put with more than one student. So in fairness to my students, I'll put this song and other stuff I've done by Evanescence in the description, so you can see how we did. But she's actually taken this sound to yet another level, and so she's, you know, she has some kind of almost industrial setting, like 9 Inch Nailsy kind of stuff, combined with this sound in at least one or two of her other songs, which I think is really interesting as well. It almost sounds like some Rammstein rhythm stuff in a couple pieces where she's singing this operatic stuff up top. So
Before I come undone, save me from the nothing I've become. Bring me.
there's that haunting, repeating that.
I've been living a lie. There's nothing outside.
There's nothing.
Bring me to life.
Hard to hold. Bring me to life. I mean, she holds the note pretty long, right? So, hey man, her stuff's pretty hard to do. But anyway, gang, thank you for joining me, and check out my next video.